Chapter 5. Stupid Games, Stupid Prizes. Izzi woke to sunlight spilling across the tiled floor, bright and merciless. Her back ached. One arm dangled across her bed, the other pressed flat against the floorboards where she had half slid off in the night. A soft groan slipped from her lips as she stirred. Her braid had come half undone, copper-streaked strands sticking every which way like seagrass after a storm. One of her ears bent awkwardly from being pressed against the floor, and when she touched it, she winced and laughed in the same breath. Her clothing was twisted and wrinkled from the rough sleep, yesterday's daring island garb clinging in odd angles. A knock rapped against the door. "Iz," came Kaelen's voice, steady as ever. She dragged herself upright, hair falling into her eyes. "Hold a moment," she croaked, then stumbled toward the door. Kaelen stood there, already dressed for the day. He wore loose swimming trousers the color of deep sea, tied with a cord at his waist, and a sleeveless linen tunic open enough to show the lattice of scars across his shoulders. His tusked mouth twitched faintly at her disheveled state. "You look like a storm hit you," he said. "And good morning to you too," Izzi muttered, rubbing her temple with a grin. Kaelen tossed a folded bundle into her arms. "Courtesy of Hesta. Said you'd want this for the water." Izzi closed the door behind her, curiosity stirring as she unfolded the bundle. What spilled into her hands was as bold as ever. A two-piece of soft, cream-colored cloth, cut snug to flatter and tied with delicate cords at the shoulders. Around the hips, a band of sheer silk draped like a sash, translucent enough to shimmer but not conceal, knotted off to one side so it trailed down her thigh like a ribbon of seafoam. She let out a laugh, shaking her head. "Bold as ever, I see." It wasn't armor. It wasn't leather and steel and shadows. It was indulgent, carefree, a thing meant for sun and water, not blood. She slipped into it, braiding her hair back into something vaguely tidy and adjusting the silk so it hung just so. When she opened the door again, Kaelen was waiting in the hall, arms folded, every inch the sentinel even in swim clothes. "Ready for the sea?" he asked. Izzi smirked, hands on her hips as she spun once, silk sash swaying. "Do I look ready?" Kaelen gave a grunt that might have been approval, though his mouth twitched again into the ghost of a smile. Together, they turned toward the stairs, the scent of salt and the crash of waves already drifting in through the open shutters. The hallway of the azure lantern echoed with a familiar thunder. Horian's voice boomed through the stairwell, spilling laughter and greetings to anyone in earshot. Izzi and Kaelen exchanged a look and followed the noise down toward the inn's entrance. Sure enough, he burst through the front doors just as they reached the lobby, his shirt half-buttoned, hair still damp from the sea. "Ah, good, you're awake, friends. I was just on my way back in." Kaelen crossed his arms, deadpan. "It's all right, you're easy to find." Horian threw his head back and laughed, then gave them a long, exaggerated look up and down. "Saints, look at you both! Fresh as the dawn. Izzi, if the sea itself could walk on two legs, it'd look half as radiant as you. And Kaelen, you're dressed like a man finally ready to stop glowering and start living." Kaelen grunted, but there was humor behind it. Izzi smirked, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, sash swaying at her hip. "Come, come!" Horian beckoned, sweeping them out into the streets with a flourish. He led them through the town square, past the great fountain where dolphins leapt in marble arcs. The plaza was alive already. Vendors hawking fruit, children chasing each other in bursts of laughter, and the air rich with the smell of baking bread. Horian clapped a hand on Kaelen's shoulder, dragging him toward a stall where a woman turned flatbreads on a hot stone and stuffed them with spiced fish and herbs. "Breakfast first," Horian declared. "Paradise demands a full belly." They ate leaning against the fountain, the food hot in their hands, flavors sharp and fresh. Izzi licked her fingers and admitted she hadn't tasted anything like it in years. Kaelen devoured his silently but with clear approval. Then Horian swept them down toward the shoreline. The beach glowed like something out of a dream, white sands soft underfoot, stretching wide and unbroken. The water lapped crystal clear, so pure it revealed every pebble and darting fish beneath. Sunlight painted the waves in silver and turquoise, gulls wheeling above with their cries sharp against the sky. Izzi wandered ahead of them, her toes sinking into the wet sand until the surf kissed her ankles. A delighted laugh escaped her lips as schools of tiny fish swirled around her feet. She walked farther, the water climbing her calves, her waist, until she eased herself down and let it flow over her body. Cool waves slid across her skin, lifting her braid, soaking the silk sash until it streamed like sea foam. Soon, only her face broke the surface, her eyes half shut as she basked in the weightless embrace. On the shore, Kaelen settled onto the sand, his feet in the water, watching with the calm of a man finally letting the world soften around him. Horian flopped down beside him with all the grace of a wave breaking, stretching his arms behind his head. "See?" Horian said, voice as wide as the sea. "Paradise. Even you can't scowl through this, Kaelen." Kaelen gave a low grunt that might have been a laugh, the salt wind tugging his short hair. "You may just be right." Izzi floated just beyond, her laughter carried back to them on the waves, and for the first time in a long while, the world felt like it wasn't trying to kill them. Izzi let the tide lap and pull around her, the coolness sliding silk smooth across her skin. She leaned back until the water hugged her shoulders, her braid floating loose like copper seaweed. Fish wove in darting patterns about her legs, silver, quick, scales glinting with sun. One brushed against her ankle and she laughed softly, tilting her head to let the surf wash over one pointed ear. Sensitive as always, it sent a shiver through her. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of the sea work its spell, each wave folding against her like it was trying to carry her farther from the weight of the past weeks. A shadow fell beside her. Kaelen lowered himself into the surf with a grunt, the water barely climbing his scarred torso as he stretched his long legs out beside her. She looked so small next to him, her form nearly submerged while he sat half out of the water, his bulk breaking the waves instead of letting them break over him. For a moment, they sat in silence, the contrast between them softened by the sea. Izzi floating weightless, Kaelen rooted like stone. Finally, she cracked one eye open and murmured, "Where's our guide off to?" Kalen's mouth twitched. "Went off to check something, though before he left he tossed me an idea." He glanced at her, the sunlight tracing every line of scar across his chest. "Work is coin. Said we might want it before we set our eyes back on Thalen." Izzi tilted her head, ears twitching at the way the water whispered against them. "Work, huh? What sort?" "Beast trouble inland," Kaelen said. His tone was matter-of-fact, but his eyes softened on her as he added, "Horian was going to gather mercenaries, but he reckons we'll do. Said if you're half as good as I was in Velimir, the three of us won't have any trouble." Izzi smirked, water dripping from her lips as she sat up, violet-gray eyes gleaming. "Half as good as you? I'll have to make it twice just to balance the scales then." Kaelen rumbled a low laugh, shaking his head. "That's what I told him." Izzi let herself sink back again, the waves rolling against her chin, fish darting like bright little sparks around her. "Beast hunting in paradise," she murmured, voice dreamy but edged with humor. "Guess we won't have too much time to grow soft." Kaelen leaned back on his arms, squinting into the blazing blue. "Not our way." And for a little while longer, they let the tide speak for them, the water flowing over scars and laughter alike. The waves carried Izzi's thoughts out with them, the sea stroking her ears and the fish weaving lazy circles around her legs. Kaelen sat solid at her side, a wall of scarred muscle half in, half out of the water, content to let her drift. The peace was broken, inevitably, by Horian's voice booming over the crash of the surf. "There you are! Saints, you two vanish like guilty lovers." Izzi sat up, water streaming off her hair, and Kaelen only sighed through his nose as their guide strode across the sand with 3 mugs clutched in his hands. He was grinning like the sun itself, linen shirt flapping open as though buttons had never been invented. He dropped into the sand before them with practiced ease, and set the drinks down. A frothing mug of ale pushed toward Kaelen, a glass of wine toward Izzi, and a heavy pour of rum he kept for himself. "Ale for the stone wall," Horian declared. "Wine for the Lady of Light. Rum for the scoundrel." Izzi accepted hers, twisting the stem between her fingers. "And what of this beast problem you mentioned?" Horian waved her concern away, rum already halfway to his lips. "Not to worry, that's a tale for another day. We'll be leaving with a caravan in a few days' time, heading inland, and then we'll talk beasts and blades. For now," he lifted his mug high, splashing rum onto his bare chest and not caring in the least. "Bask while we can. Drink, eat, swim. Let the sea rinse the road from your bones. Tomorrow will be louder, dirtier, and full of teeth. But today..." Kaelen clinked his ale against the rim of Horian's mug, a rare grin tugging at his mouth. "Today's enough." Izzi raised her glass last, smirking faintly as her violet-gray eyes lingered on the horizon. "For now," she echoed. The three of them drank together, the sun burning overhead, the water gleaming like crystal at their feet, and, for the first time in too long, no shadow lingered at their backs. Izzi leaned back into the water, the tide lapping at her chin, violet gray eyes half shut in contentment. Gods, this feels good. If I wasn't such a great swimmer, I'd have drowned myself in bliss already. Horian, who had been tearing at a piece of fruit with his teeth, perked up instantly. His grin widened like a shark's. A great swimmer, are you? Izzi cracked an eye open at him, smirking. Better than you, loudmouth, that much I'm sure of. Kaelen gave a low chuckle. Here we go. Horian tossed the fruit pit into the sand and spread his arms, booming loud enough for gulls to scatter. Then prove it. The buoy, out there. He jabbed a finger toward the bobbing marker in the glimmering blue. First one there and back. Winner claims a prize. Izzi sat up, water sluicing off her shoulders. And what are you putting up as a prize? Horian's eyes gleamed. If I win, you owe me one night. A romantic evening, moonlight, wine, the works. I'll woo you until you swoon. Kaelen muttered into his mug. You'll drown her before that happens. Izzi ignored him, tilting her head as if weighing the words, fingers trailing along the water. Fine. But if I win, you owe me a favor. No questions, no wriggling, no clever tongue. When I call it in, you do it. That stilled Horian's grin for half a heartbeat, long enough for Izzi to know she'd hit him with something he hadn't expected. Then he laughed, rich and full, and slapped his thigh. Dangerous, elf, but I like it. Agreed. Kaelen groaned, setting his ale aside. Saints save me. One of you's going to regret this, and I'll be the one hauling your bodies out of the surf. Horian tore his shirt over his head and flung it down in the sand with a flourish. Come then. Let's see if your stroke matches your tongue. Izzi smirked, tightening the silk knot at her hip. Try not to choke on my wake, Hale. Kaelen pushed himself upright from where he sat in the surf, brushing the sand from his palms. His tusked grin was small but unmistakable. Fine. If you're both going to act like children, I'll be the judge. Horian slapped him on the back, nearly toppling him forward. That's the spirit, Kael. A fair arbiter, though he's bound to favor me, of course. Izzi's violet gray eyes flashed as she stood, water curling around her waist. Favor you? Please. He's already seen me outrun you, now he'll see me outswim you. Kaelen raised a hand, voice low and calm against their sparks. Simple rules. To the buoy and back. First hand to slap this very rock wins. He planted his palm on a stone jutting from the shallows. Horian stripped his shirt and flung it aside, muscles cut and bronzed by the sun. Izzi tightened the silk sash at her hip, her braid dripping down her back. They crouched in the shallows like predators, eyes fixed on the bobbing marker out in the glimmering blue. Ready? Kaelen said. The waves hushed for half a heartbeat. Go. They tore forward, water exploding in white spray. Horian's strokes were wide and powerful, cutting through the surf with sheer force. Izzi moved sleek and sharp, her body sliding through the water like a fish, strokes quick and precise. For a while, she pulled ahead, her smaller form darting between the waves with speed. But Horian was relentless. By the time they hit the buoy, his reach brought him alongside her, both of them slapping it in the same instant. They pivoted, breathless laughter spilling from Izzi's lips, determination blazing in Horian's grin. The swim back was chaos. Splashing, stealing glances, trading jabs mid-breath. Slower than a gull, Hale. Izzi gasped, her laughter bubbling with the surf. You call that swimming? Fast enough to catch you, sea sprite. Horian barked, spitting salt water. The shoreline loomed, Kaelen standing sentinel with arms crossed. They lunged the last stretch, surf churning around them. Izzi's hand slapped the rock a breath after Horian's. Kaelen's voice carried over the waves, flat but final. Horian. Izzi flopped backward into the shallows, laughing despite herself, chest heaving as water streamed down her skin. Saints damn it, too close. Horian roared with triumph, pounding the water with his fist. Victory! The sea herself bends to my charm. He leaned down, dripping, to grin at Izzi. A night elf, wine, moonlight, and me. Don't think you can wriggle free. Izzi smirked, pushing wet hair from her face. Don't push your luck, loudmouth, I pay my debts. Kaelen shook his head, muttering, Looks like you're getting the Horian adventure you always wanted. Shut up, Izzi said with a smirk. Horian slapped the seawater from his chest, still grinning like a madman. He slicked his dark hair back with both hands, then stood, triumphant, as though he had conquered the entire ocean rather than simply touched a buoy first. Well then? he boomed, voice carrying down the beach and startling gulls into flight. A race, a victory, and a promise. I'll be by your room at sunset, Izzy. Be ready. The night awaits us? He didn't wait for her answer, striding off toward the boardwalk with his shirt half draped across his shoulder, already chatting up two passing women as though he'd known them his whole life. Kaelen's laughter rumbled low in his chest, rare and genuine. He shook his head, water dripping from his jaw. You've stepped in it now. Izzy dragged her fingers back through her wet braid, violet-gray eyes following Horian until he disappeared into the bustle of Cerulea's rest. She sighed. I guess our tour is cut short then. Seems so. Kaelen settled back in the surf, still amused. They lingered on the beach as the sun began its long descent, the sky painted in streaks of gold and crimson. The water turned copper, fish flashing silver beneath the surface until the tide blurred into shadow. When at last the gulls quieted and lanterns flickered to life along the shoreline, they stood and made their way back toward the azure lantern. At the inn's third floor, Izzy slipped toward her door. Kaelen leaned against his own with arms crossed, a crooked grin tugging his lips. Good luck, Iz. Izzy shot him a look equal parts defiance and dread. Thanks for nothing. She pushed into her room and closed the door behind her. The room was dim, the shutters thrown open to the sea breeze. On her bed lay a folded parcel of fabric, a note perched atop in bold, looping script. For the most radiant star in tonight's sky. She squinted at it, already half regretting everything, then unfolded the fabric. Silk spilled across her hands in daring swaths of deep indigo trimmed with silver thread. The top bared her midriff entirely, cut low across the shoulders so her collarbones would gleam in the lantern light. The skirt was slit high along both thighs, layered in gauzy silk that promised more suggestion than concealment. A belt of soft silver cords was meant to tie at the hip, with delicate tassels that would sway as she walked. Izzy held it up, sighing through her nose. Bold as ever, Horian. For a long moment she considered tossing it back on the bed and answering the door in her leathers out of sheer spite. But then, with another sigh, she tugged the garments into place. The silk was cool against her skin, the fabric whispering with every movement. Her reflection in the small mirror made her ears flush pink, though her smile turned sly as she adjusted the sash. Well, she murmured, brushing her fingers over the faint scar at her lip. Let's see if the loudmouth can keep his mouth shut long enough to notice. She sat on the edge of the bed, hair still damp from the sea, waiting for the inevitable thunder of Horian hail at her door. Izzy! The call boomed down the corridor like a drumbeat, familiar enough to make Izzy half smile, half wince. She rose from the bed, silk skirts slipping against her thighs, and reached the latch just as Horian's silhouette cut the lantern glow. He stood framed in warm light, not the usual hurricane but something shaped and gleaming. Indigo silks, a crimson sash knotted carelessly at his hip, a bronze cuff at his wrist that caught the glow. In one hand, a bundle of flowers, moon-pale frangipani, sprays of night-blooming jasmine, and a single bright hibiscus like a splash of sunset. Lanterns had been strung the length of the hall, their gold halos overlapping to form a gentle path toward the stairs and the door beyond. And then, like a wave folding into itself, his voice softened. You look stunning, he said, and the grin Izzy knew so well uncurled into something quieter, warmer. He offered his hand without flourish. The part of her that braced for spectacle blinked, thrown. Her fingers found his. His palm was warm and steady. Come, he murmured. There's a night waiting. They followed the lanterns down into the city as though walking a constellation laid on stone. The sea breeze moved through open shutters. Distant laughter flared and fell. Vendors tipped their chins at Horian. Children called his name, and he answered them with small gestures and smaller words, never letting his attention drift from the elf at his side. Izzy watched him from the corner of her eye, the brightness still there, but banked, like a hearth tended low. The sash at her waist breathed with each step, her ears pricked to every sound, the silk at her shoulder whispering against skin. What? She said at last. No audience tonight? Not everything I do is for a crowd, he answered, a sliver of smile, eyes crinkling. It wasn't a line, it landed and stayed. Lanterns led them off the promenade and onto the sand. The surprise waited where the tide unrolled its silver. Driftwood poles stood like sentinels, garlanded with more lanterns. Their reflections trembled on the skin of the water. Cushions and woven blankets formed a nest on the beach. A low table held plates set like offerings, grilled sea bream licked by herbs and oil, a salad of orange and fennel, figs ripened to jam sweetness. pomegranate seeds shining like rubies. A decanter of pale island wine sat in an ice bowl glazed with salt. The air smelled of jasmine, citrus, and the good part of smoke. Farther down the shore, a lone fiddler sat on an overturned skiff, bowing slow notes that braided with the hush hiss of the surf. Izzy stood very still and let the picture soak in. "You did this?" He gave a half shrug, though his grin was quieter now. "Paradise should be shared properly. Please sit." They ate without rush. Izzy took a bite of bream, the skin crackled, the flesh fell away clean and tender. Oil and lemon, a snap of sea. The wine cooled the back of her tongue, bright and floral. She watched Horian pour, watched the way he didn't fill silence to the brim but let it breathe between them like another tide. "That storm you bragged about," she said finally, turning the stem of her cup. "The near drowning and saving Hesta from pirates. That true?" "True," he said, not booming, not boasting, just opening a door. "Just a memory. I was 14 when the storm took our boat. I swallowed more salt than breath. Should have died, but somehow I crawled back, half drowned, half broken. Hesta was the one who found me, dragged me to warmth. Years later, when pirates came to take her, I didn't think. I just couldn't let them. She was the only person who had ever saved me. I owed her everything." He didn't make himself grand in the telling. He left room in it for fear and for gratitude. It startled something soft in Izzy she didn't let out often. He sipped, then tipped his head, inviting and careful. "And you, Izzy? What storms have you survived?" Her mouth opened on habit. The words snagged. Banishment like a slammed gate. Salim's green eyes. Fingers on her arm counting coin. The scar at her lip pulled tighter. Horian saw the falter. He eased backward a fraction, palms open on his knees the way men do when approaching a frightened animal. Not pitying, not prying. "It's all right," he said. "You owe me nothing you don't want to give." Air moved again. She let out a breath that shook more than she liked and found a crooked smile. "You're not what I expected." "Good," he said simply. And for the first time she believed that word was for her, not for whatever show he usually played. The fiddler's tune deepened, low strings like a second heartbeat. Horian rose and offered his hand again. "That dance you keep denying me. One song, nothing that hurts." Heat climbed the rims of her ears. "I don't dance. I never really have." "Pretend we're fighting," he murmured, close enough she could smell salt and soap on his skin. "You've always been good at that, right? Follow my lead." She laughed despite herself, quick, breathy, and set her palm in his. The callus along his thumb brushed the one on hers, a small shock of recognition. They stepped onto the wet line where the sea licked the shore, and the world narrowed to the slow sweep of his arm, the give of sand beneath bare feet, the weight and counterweight of two bodies finding a rhythm that wasn't quite battle and wasn't quite surrender. He didn't spin her. He didn't perform. He guided. Pressure here, space there, listening with his hands. The waves gathered around their ankles, cooled warm skin, slid away. The lanterns swayed. The fiddler found a melody that felt like something remembered rather than learned. Izzy let her chin tip closer to his shoulder than prudence advised. The scar at her lip softened, almost a smile. Her ears, so quick to catch the world's harshness, colored under the brush of wind and the hush of strings. "See?" he said, barely above the surf. "All a fight is, slowed down, breath and timing." "You're insufferable," she murmured, which, on her tongue, passed for praise. "Occupational hazard." His grin flickered there, less blaze, more ember. And when she shifted, he shifted, and it felt possible for a heartbeat that the world could be this easy. The song faded like the tide putting itself to bed. They stood with it a breath longer than necessary, then stepped apart in a small, almost reluctant sway. "Well," Izzy pushed hair from her cheek, aiming for droll and hitting it only halfway. "You didn't crush my toes." "Congratulations, I'll add it to my legends," he said, and there it was again, that softened grin, the one that belonged to no audience. They walked back along the lantern path with the surf at their backs and the town's gentle clamor ahead. Izzy's sandals whispered on stone. His hand hovered near her elbow without quite touching, a courtesy that felt louder than any flourish. People greeted him. He lifted 2 fingers and kept walking. At her door, he stopped. The flowers had wilted a little with the salt air. He looked at them, then at her, as if weighing a dozen ridiculous lines and choosing none. He bowed instead, small and real. "A favor owed," he said lightly, then gentler. "Good night, Izzy." "Good night, Horian," she answered, surprising herself with how soft it came out. She slipped inside and leaned back against the wood, the cool panel steady against her spine. Lantern light from the window painted her bare midriff in pale gold. The tassel at her hip ticked time in the breeze. Her ears were still warm. She touched the scar at her lip and found it less tight. "What in the hells," she whispered to the quiet room, "have I gotten into?" The knock came soft, almost tentative. Izzy lifted her head from where she sat perched at the edge of the bed, still dressed in Horian's silks, the lantern light painting her bare shoulders gold. Her heart lurched when his voice came through the door, quiet for once. "Izzy, I've got a bottle and 2 glasses. Thought we could share one more before sleep." Her pulse hammered at her temples. Foolish, she thought, foolish to let him any closer. But her legs carried her to the door anyway, and when she opened it, there he was. Bottle tucked under one arm, glasses in the other, his grin smaller than usual, softened by nerves. "May I?" he asked. She stepped aside and he entered. They sat together at the head of the bed, side by side, their knees almost touching. He poured carefully, the wine pale and cool, and handed her a glass. She lifted it to her lips, but after a few sips her thoughts tangled, her tongue heavier with the weight of them. "Celine," Izzy whispered at last, staring into the dark red pool in her glass. "I once yearned for her, wanted her." Her chest rose and fell in a tremor. "She saw me, shaped me, and twisted me into something else. She made me what I am, and still, she follows me. Everywhere I go, it's her shadow, her voice." Her fingers tightened on the stem. "And the worst part? Even now, even knowing everything, I feel drawn to her, like a tether I can't cut. I don't understand myself." Her words broke into the hush of the room. The sea whispered through the shutters. She didn't dare look at him, half expecting a laugh, a careless quip. But there was nothing, just his silence, heavy and steady. She set her glass down with shaking hands. He mirrored her, placing his aside as well. Without asking, he shifted closer, sitting at the edge of the bed now, then leaning back until his arms slid gently around her. He drew her against him, not demanding, not tight, just an anchor. Izzy let her head rest beneath his chin, hair spilling against his chest. The warmth of his hold steadied her breathing, the steady drum of his heartbeat drowning out the echoes of Celine's name in her skull. "You don't need to understand yourself tonight," Horian murmured, voice low and careful. "Not with me." Her throat closed around an answer. She let her eyes fall shut, the taste of wine lingering, the scent of him, salt, spice, and warmth filling her lungs. The two of them stayed that way, neither speaking further. The glasses stood forgotten on the table, the bottle half full. The sea sang, the lantern burned low, and eventually, exhaustion wrapped them both. She slept first, cradled in his arms, and when sleep claimed him too, he simply held her tighter, as if daring her ghosts to try and take her away. Izzy woke to an empty bed. The lantern had burned itself to smoke, the shutters still open to a sea whispering pale in dawnlight. Her head ached faintly, her body still wrapped in the silks Horian had chosen for her the night before. She lifted her hand, fingertips brushing her bare midriff, and memory struck sharp, his arms around her, the words she had let fall, the way she had spoken Celine's name like a wound reopened. "Why did I tell him that?" she whispered, her voice ragged. With a groan, she dragged the sheets over her head, burying herself in their cool linen folds as if they could hide her from herself. A knock rattled the door. She froze, then pushed herself upright, silk skirts twisting around her legs. She pulled the latch. Kaelen stood there, broad and steady as always. His tusked grin tugged, eyes flicking once over her state, silks crumpled, hair wild, ears pinked at the tips. He scratched his jaw. "Came to check on ya. These outfits they're, She waved him off, exasperated. Yeah, I know." Before Kaelen could reply, Horian's voice boomed from the corner of the hall. "Izzy!" He rounded the corner like a storm at sea, holding a tray high above his head. On it sat plates of fruit, spiced bread, and steaming bowls of porridge perfumed with cinnamon. "I made you breakfast for a goddess." He stopped short at the sight of Kaelen. "Ah, Kaelen! Will you be joining us? There's enough to make even you smile." Kaelen rolled his eyes, but Izzy, still half flustered, looked from one man to the other. Her gaze lingered on Horian, his grin broad, his energy loud as ever, but beneath it, she thought she saw the echo of the quiet man from the night before. She found herself nodding. Yeah, of course he'll join us. And in that small, unexpected moment, Izzi wondered if Horian Hale might not be the fool she had first believed, but something far more complicated.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. More chapters are on the way.